Hello, this is Paul Barezel, and I'm going to talk today about Western mythology in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is a 1959 Western, which stars Jimmy Stewart as Ransom Stoddard, a man from the East, a lawyer, whose dream is to travel out west. When he travels out west, his goal is simple. He desires to bring order to the East and to the West. 2, we examine John Wayne's character, Bert. Bert is a traditional cowboy who wants to keep things the way they are. And the third character is Lee Marvin's character, the villain, the outlaw Liberty Valance, whose desire is to prevent the Western Territory from becoming a state because he's making too much money as a criminal. We are going to examine The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance as Western myth through 3 different parameters. 1 is masculinity, 2 is freedom, and 3 is the American ideal of hard work and what work is. We start with number 1, which is masculinity. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance oversees a change in masculinity over what does it truly mean to be a man in America. When it starts, Jimmy Stewart's character, Ransom Stoddard, is a lawyer who is attacked and beaten up by Lee Marvin's character, the outlaw Liberty Valance. Liberty Valance represents the worst version of masculinity in the Wild West. The outlaw who does what he wants, takes what he wants, says what he wants, and acts in any way he wants because he is feared. When people see him, they step aside. People give him what they want because he will kill you. It is a form of masculinity that goes to an extreme. The extreme that it takes is very simple. It is the extreme of madness, of I can do what I want to do whenever I want to do it. The second character is the character of Ransom Stoddard. Ransom Stoddard goes in a different way. He believes in law. He believes a true man is an individual who is controlled by their dedication to law, into a form of self-control. That rather than get what they want through a gun or through fighting, they attain it through courts of law. The third form of man is the good form of the cowboy, kind of the opposite of Lee Marvin's Liberty Valance. And that is John Wayne's character of Bert. Bert is not bright. He can't read or write. He doesn't understand anything about books or law. But he does understand one thing. As he says to Ransom Stoddard, a man has got to be a man by standing up for himself. And so how does he do that? He can shoot. He can ride. He can beat anybody up. He can use a whip. All of these things make him a man in the Western style of the Old West. Now, an interesting thing to note is that who is the manly figure, the masculine figure? It changes over the course of the movie. When Ransom Stoddard arrives in this Wild West town in a Western territory in the early 1880s, he is not considered a man so much that the job he gets is working effectively as a waitress at a Mexican restaurant. But once he establishes his law firm, and once he believes that he is the man who shoots and kills Liberty Valance, he moves up as a man in the community until eventually by 1916, when the movie starts and ends, Ransom Stoddard is no longer considered effeminate, but is considered the true version of a man. He is the new form of masculinity, the lawyer, the intelligent man, the man who gets what he wants not through a gun, but through reason and logic, showing that the Western Territory in the Wild West has civilized and settled. This is represented by the fact that Ransom Stoddard becomes a senator, a governor, and could be vice president of the United States, moving up from waitress to maybe vice president from 1881 to the years 1916. Number 2, we see how masculinity and how it changes affects Lee Marvin. The people of the territory start to get less frightened of Lee Marvin's Liberty Valance. They're not as afraid of liberty anymore. In fact, newspapers start to write about how much they don't like him. Liberty Valance defeated, it says, when Ransom Stoddard gets a vote to be taken on statehood for the territory. And when he threatens Jimmy Stewart's character, Ransom Stoddard, Stoddard shows up. Bert's the one who kills him, but he's killed. Liberty Valance disappears. His form of masculinity disappears. His form of lawless masculinity disappears as the society becomes better. Next, what happens to Bert? Well, as Western civilization changes, a man like Bert isn't as needed as anymore. A man who can shoot, a man who can fight. And so he becomes an alcoholic. He stops riding horses. He stops working. When he dies effectively forgotten. Ransom Stoddard is the one who visits him when he dies. So masculinity changes. It starts out in the movie that the true man is John Wayne, the man who can shoot and fight, but it ends that the true man, the true form of masculinity, is Ransom Stoddard, the man who can think, who can write, and who can use law. Moving on to the next point. What about freedom? Freedom is one of those things we think about when it comes to the American Wild West, an era where anyone could be anything they wanted to be, where you could sell a concoction that you made in a bathtub and you could claim that that was the cure for cancer and people would buy it. You could go off and pan for gold in Colorado or California and go from being a bum to a billionaire. But what about freedom and the man who shot Liberty Valance? Well, once again, there's different forms of freedom to be examined, but only one that wins out. So let's look at the character of Liberty Valance. His form of Western freedom is I can do whatever I want because I have the strength. Might makes right. It's like in Plato's Republic, in which you had the one individual who says to Socrates, I am strong, so I can get whatever I want. And that is absolute freedom because none can attack me or fight me because I can beat him up. Well, this is what Liberty Valance believes. I'm the scariest guy, and I can get whatever I want from anyone, and that's true freedom, and I don't want to see it change. Because once the Western territory becomes a state and gets a court system, I'm out of business. Now, Bert's a little different. Bert doesn't want to see society modernize because he views freedom as the open range. He says it to Stoddard all the time, I don't need education. My only education for me is the desert and the stars and the range. And as long as that is what is valued, I don't need to learn to read and write. For this reason, he believes freedom is the ability to travel where you want, when you want, and to be able to stay who you are and be happy. And then there's Ransom Stoddard. Ransom Stoddard, the man from the East, the lawyer, he views freedom as a form of ordered liberty. When he teaches school, when he opens up a school to teach a lot of the ignorant people of the town how to read, he teaches them with the Declaration of Independence. And there's a line in it I really like, where Pompey, the African-American sidekick of John Wayne's character, Bert, he is unable to read that important part to the Declaration of Independence, which is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. When he can't read this, Jimmy Stewart looks at him and says, that's all right, Pompey. A lot of people forget that one. And a lot of people have trouble with that one. What is he saying there? He's saying, what is liberty? What is freedom? Freedom is the ability for you to enjoy those three freedoms of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that all are considered equal under the law. He believes in an ordered liberty, that law does not come from the barrel of a gun. Law does not come from an unsettled wilderness, but freedom comes from the law. And that it is through the law that liberty is actually enthroned. One can see that once the territory becomes a state and it modernizes, men like Liberty Valance no longer threaten people because Ransom Stoddard had brought law to a lawless world and in so doing assured true freedom. The final thing is hard work. Hard work is generally something that every cowboy in a Western wants to be remembered for. that they did their share, that they worked hard and said less. What is the work that we see in the man who shot Liberty Valance? Well, the first one is this. Liberty Valance. He believes that work doesn't matter. What matters is the outcome. So if he has to steal from somebody, if he has to steal from a woman, for example, in the stagecoach, if he has to kill people, it doesn't matter. His work is all defined by outcome and wealth. And that turns out to be his undoing as he's shot dead in the streets. Bert's character, he views work as the only true work is manual labor, to work with one's hands, to ride the range. And he does not see a value to any work that involves reading, writing, or the usage of the mind. In this way, he's very much in the mid-19th century. But as we can see as the movie progresses, he gets left behind. His value of work does not prove itself to be lasting. But then once again, there's Ransom Stoddard. Ransom Stoddard, his dedication to work rests upon the belief that no man or woman is degraded by the labor they do. But you should never stop seeking to do more. And so what does he choose to do? He works the jobs he can. He works as a waitress. He works as a teacher. He finally becomes a lawyer. And when he is called upon to go off and fight Liberty Valance on an evening, he picks up work he isn't good at. He is taught to shoot by Bert, but he knows he can't kill Liberty Valance. But he goes out anyway. And when Bert helps him kill Liberty Valance, when Bert shoots him and gives the credit to Ransom Stoddard, he says one final thing about work. And that is, he says to him, you taught those people how to read and write. Give them something to read and write about. Accept the nomination for territorial delegate. And so he accepts the nomination. Once he accepts that nomination, it creates his political career a new form of work so that he can work day in, day out to make his state, this territory, into the world he wants it to be. And Bert, he's forced to realize that his view of work has been replaced by that of Ransom Stoddard's. That in the end, hard work matters, but work does change. So in conclusion, the man who shot Liberty Valance shows us many views of the American West. The biggest thing I can pick up, though, is I love this final line. When it turns out that Ransom Stoddard has built his entire career off being the man who shot Liberty Valance and killed him, but it turns out that Bert, the man who died penniless, alone, and drunk, was the one who really shot him, well, the newspaper editor doesn't run with that story. He doesn't try to destroy Ransom Stoddard's political career. What he says instead is, when truth surpasses myth, print the myth. After all, he says, myth is what the West is made of. Without it, we're only the modern age. Thank you.